Michael was our second child, and he made sure that he got attention.
We had put latches on the door in the house because he was a master of getting out of anything and everything. Very active, kept us on our toes. My brother would call us from a couple houses down in the park, the trailer park we used to live in. 5 in the morning, we were see if we were missing a child.
He had a couple incidents with vehicles. I needed a break one day, so I told my husband when he came home, I said, well, you know, you just need to give me a break and let him go with you. And when he did, he went down there, and Michael got up in Papa's truck and knocked it out of, or pulled it out of gear and ran it smack dab into a New York Power Authority truck, and there you go. 2 vehicles, brand new, with a Michael mark.
I think in a year and a half, he wrecked 3 vehicles. You had to keep your vehicles locked and keep the keys out of them. And then I think it was around 3 years old. He just wasn't his energetic self.
So, of course, when life changed for him and he started getting very mellow and, you know, laying around and not getting into mischief, I was like, no, something's not right with him. It's like, no, this is not, no, something's not right. So I took him to the doctor, and he said, oh, it must just be something viral. And I said, no, okay. And we waited a few more days, and it didn't get any better. And I took him back again, and he said, no, it's nothing, it's nothing. I said, you know what, I'm just taking him to the hospital, and I'm just going to demand that they just do blood work, because something is not right, because this is not my son. My son is all over the place. He's not this lethargic laying around kid.
Finally, my wife took him down to the hospital, and they tested him for it, and he came up with leukemia. So that was a pretty devastating moment, because where we came from, the hospital, there was no hope. We didn't stay in our local hospital. Somebody had talked to a nurse, or somebody had got a hold of my wife while she was there, and told her about this place. It was a couple hours south of us, Westchester. So I guess they made some phone calls and got him set up, and they had a team waiting for him down there. So we drove that. Even to go down to that, it was a mess. There was tornadoes. It was stormed all the way there.
Yeah, it was storming that night, and it was quite an adventure getting there. And I was just praying the whole way, Lord, I know you've got this, you know, because I just had to, you know, focus on him.
He started his treatment within a couple hours, had him in a room. But I think when he was first diagnosed, I think we were there in the hospital, felt like ever, but it was a couple months. So we had children split up all over the place, people watching them here and there, and while we were down in the hospital. So it was quite challenging, and every time he spiked a fever, we were down there a minimum of a week. That was even after we got home. He had gone through treatments for 5 years. It was five-year regimen with the bone marrows and the spinal taps and you name it. He went through it. It wasn't easy to watch. And we were introduced to, I don't know how many kids that they had been treating over the years, you know, and telling us, reassuring us, you know, this one, you know, has had it this long and he's been in remission, this and the other thing. You know, long story short, by the time Mike was done and out of the hospital, none of them were here anymore. So in the human, in the flesh part of it, it was frightening. And I think it was probably about halfway through his treatment, or towards the end of his treatment, he had a real bad real bad run. He was, at times, with temperatures like 105, 106, and they had to put him in this cool bed. It was just plastic linings. It was like in a refrigerator. And it was a difficult time.
God had this thing with me where he would just give me an unction and I would just know I need to pray. Most times I had no clue what it was about, so I prayed in the Spirit because I figured the Spirit knows everything. He just communicates with God, and that's that. And so, I would just do that. And then later, I got a phone call from him, and I knew what I was praying about.
He flatlined on us one time in there, and it was about 9 of them on him working, and I kind of got shoved out of the way. But I think, I was praying all through it, but I think at that time it really took me to my knees. It was shocking, it was horrifying, but the reality of this might be it was there. And I remember crying out, "Don't take him." And I prayed with the best of the knowledge I had at the time. And it was about 5 minutes later, he just sat up in the bed and said, "I want a rib sandwich." He loved the rib sandwiches down in the cafeteria. I don't think I ever went to the cafeteria as fast as I did then. I went down and got him a rib sandwich. Wasn't long after that Make-A-Wish came in the room. And normally Make-A-Wish don't come in because that's if you had any wish, the last thing you wanted to do on this earth, what would your wish be? So that wasn't very reassuring that things were going well. So they talked with him, and he decided he wanted to go see the Power Rangers. So off we went. And then it was, he came down sick again. He wasn't out of remission, but they couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. Something had set in his lung.
Their only explanation was it was probably due to the chemo, as to why it happened. They didn't, at first they were thinking, it could have been the California sands, and, because we did a lot throughout California between being the Power Rangers and going on the beaches and whatever they had done.
So they ended up going in his lung, and they took out about a quarter of his lung to determine what it was, this, that, and the other thing. And he was clear ever since that. Never had another problem.
And Mikey was back, mellower, but he was alive, and more himself and more his personality. I was seeing, and yeah, God just brought him through that. We saw a lot of different changes even within the family, so after you go through something like this, you're like, well, Lord, why did we have to go through this? But then you see the changes that it makes to the other people around you, the people that have an idea of what you've gone through, and how it's even touched them, and brought them closer to believing, So, I remember there was a time, though, because I stayed in the hospital all the time with Mike through the leukemia. that I had to come to terms and tell God, listen, you gave him to me. And if you want to take him back, I can't stop you. I'm good with whatever, because you know what's best, and sometimes in life, you just have to go there and you just have to be like, whatever you want, God, because you know what's best for me. And, but God kind of reassured me that since once I was willing to release him, it just seemed that everything changed. It was just different. That it was going to be okay.
As time goes by, sometimes that miracle becomes a distant thing of the past. And it's that que sera, life goes on. And you forget to give God all the glory. Even for all the little things he does in a day. And then years later, I knew he had something for Mike to do, and we had talked about it, but life went on, and, God got put on a side shelf or a back burner, and we just went on with our lives. Things were going good. Mike was working. He'd done his college. He was doing good. He had to go back to college to get his journeyman's. He had got his apprentice done. He was going for his journeyman's, and he was working over on Jupiter Island with his brother, doing some projects for Sands Construction. And he was out after work, went out with a bunch of friends or whatever, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, 2:30, somewhere around there, we got a knock on the door. It was the sheriff's department letting us know our son had been in a near fatal accident. He was in bad shape, and they were flying him up to Lawnwood, that we better get there quick.
Before we even got in the car, God was just telling me, declare it. And I was like, so I told my husband, I was like, listen, before we move, before this key goes in the ignition, God wants me to just declare he will live and not die and declare the works of the Lord. And that's it. That's where we stand. We don't waver. We don't waver. That's our word from God. And he said, okay, then that's where we stand. And I said, we're going to have to just stand there.
I arrived on scene. I found a large pickup truck that had hit a tree. As soon as I could make patient contact, I realized that we had a critically injured patient. Shortly after that, the engine arrived on scene. We started going to work, trying to get into the vehicle. The doors were jammed. We ended up using the spreaders, the jaws of life, to open the door to get the victim out. The whole time, the victim was, like I said, critically injured. We got him out of the vehicle, into the ambulance, and then the ambulance took him over to our awaiting helicopter. And shortly after that, they took off to the trauma center.
The whole family, was called, and we all gathered in the waiting room. It was about 5 hours of surgery, and they didn't have much hope for us. He had shattered the whole side of his head. And so we just kept standing. God said he will live and not die, and we'll declare the works of the Lord. And it didn't matter what they said. I wasn't listening at that point, because you know what? When you get a word from God, you have to make your choice. Are you listening to the world, or are you listening to your God? And I know my God can do anything. And I was like, no, we're standing. We're standing. We're coming against that. And we would pray against it and say, no, those words are going to fall. That's not what it's going to be. He's going to be restored. He's going to be fully, and we just declared it all the way through. It didn't matter.
And then when the surgeon came out, there was no hope. He said he did all he could do. If it required more surgery, there was nothing to be done. He said, if he makes it 48 to 72 hours, and makes it, there'll be no quality of life, no value of life. He would have no use of the right side of his body. He was saying there's just no use of the right side at all, because it had crushed the whole left side of his skull in, and I couldn't save the skull. So it was just it was a devastating moment.
He was on life support. They were saying, well, we have to see, what happens the first 72 hours, if he makes it. And we just kept saying, he's going to make it. God gave us a word, and we're just standing on that.
When I first saw him, you can think images or whatever. But when you walk in there and you see something like that, I cried out to God, because I knew God had him either way. But I didn't believe it was his time, all he's been through, to go out like that. I knew God had a purpose for him. And me and the boys just prayed over him. And what a testimony it was going to be for the Lord. That this was going to pass, and he wasn't going home. He was staying with us. So, as time went by, Pastor Todd, he had come up and prayed over Mike. And another pastor had come. My son Henry had a pastor come up as well, his pastor, prayer pastor. But continually I had to keep binding Satan, throwing him, and it's just standing on the word, because God's word don't come back void. And he don't lie. God tells you he's going to do something, he's going to do it. With all the bones on the side of his head that they said were broke, he was going to require more surgeries. And when they went back in and done a CAT scan, all the bones were actually laid back in place, and they were all healing properly, and wasn't requiring the surgeries they thought he was going to need. And just before that, my wife had got a phone call from a family member that she hadn't talked to in a couple of years, and told my wife that she had a dream, or she saw that God was knitting bones back together in Mike's head, and they didn't really know anything had happened because we hadn't told anybody.
She called and she said, I don't know what this means. She said, but God wants you to know he's knitting the bones back together. And I was like, okay, because at this point, we had just heard that because his whole cheekbone and everything was all shattered, all the little pieces, he would need plastic surgery and all this. And so we were like, wow, okay, the way they were talking, it was going to be like 5 different surgeries for this, for that, for the other thing. But no, they came back and they said his bones have lined back up. These shattered bone pieces, the fragments and everything, have come back into position where now they didn't feel he would need plastic surgery. So we were like, that's our God. See, that's our God, because Here, he had someone who didn't even know there was an accident call me and give me a word, because probably I was too frazzled to hear myself, and just tell me that he was knitting them all back together, and that's what it was. We were just looking to see him come off of life support, and once he did, then my husband, he stayed with him the whole time. So he was right there saying, oh, well, can we reduce these meds? And they were resistant once he was off of life support. They were resistant about reducing anything, because my husband was wanting to get him a little more coherent and see where we were, because the doctors were saying, oh, well, he's not going to have this, he won't have that, he won't have quality of life, blah, blah, blah. And we just kept standing against it. Whatever they said, we just said, no, that's not going to be what it is. And so, yeah, we finally got them to reduce the meds enough where we could start getting him up out of bed and get him moving, sitting in a chair, walking, standing, and eventually he was walking well enough that we could even get him doing stairs with help of just a few people, 2 people, 2 of them would do. So he had progressed like that much, and they didn't think, he would be able to do this. And here he was doing it within just a couple of weeks from coming out of, being on life support.
Once we got him off some of the medicines, I got one of the nurses up there. He was a really big help. We started getting Michael up out of the bed. At first, it took us, I think, 4 or 5 of us to get him walking and to keep his head held up, because he had no head strength. But as time passed, every day it was better and better and better and stronger and stronger. And then the neurosurgeon had come in that, because we still didn't know where he was going to get a skull. And this neurosurgeon came in and he goes, that's easy. He goes, I'm just going to give him a new skull. Just that easy. And he gave him a 3D CAT scan, and I think it was about a week later, his skull came in from Germany. And then that was put in. He didn't have to wear his helmet anymore.
By the time they were talking about us going to Brooks, to the rehab, we had just got him eating even. But he still wasn't talking. He still didn't have the small motor skills of writing and things like that as much. But he was mobile. So when we first got there, they were like, oh, well, he has to use a wheelchair. And we were like, no, because we had put him in a wheelchair once to get him outside at Lawnwood, and he just, he enjoyed rolling around. And after that, he didn't really we had a rough time getting him back up where he wanted to walk, because, he wanted to play. He just wanted to wheel. So when we got up there and they were like, oh, no, you have to, and then we were like, oh, no, we're not doing that. Because, after one ride, he was like wanting to be there. And we were like, no, he's walking and so get whatever you need to get so that we can continue what we're doing with him.
They asked us, so what do you want us to do with him? And at this point, he wasn't talking. A lot of it, he was just going through the motions. He walked for miles. Oh, we put on miles roaming the hospital. That's all he wanted to do was walk. And that's a miracle on his own, because he wasn't supposed to. But the interaction I think Mike brought God for sure, and Mike, using Mike, brought in a whole new ball game to them therapists up there, because what they fed into Mike was social activity. What he, pretty much what he wasn't getting, because all he gets is me and Mom, we're his parents, But he had three pretty good therapists up there, and they took a good liking to him and got him, his coordination was a lot better. Every day, something new every day. So we were up there about 2 weeks, and the insurance company said, well, he's eating, he's walking, no more therapy. So they released him, sent him home.
We were home, and he always tried to talk to his oldest brother, John. Always gave 110%. And John told him, you have to start talking to everybody else, not just me. And so he started doing what he could, and it was almost like you're raising a child, because he was getting his sounds. He needed to be reacquainted with sounds and relearn words, and it's all that, so we went through the why, because once he got hold of that word, he was using that a lot. Just like a 2-year-old would, was what reminded me of it. Was like, because he wanted to know why. He needed to know why on everything. So we got through, that stage and went on. And so, no, I mean, he's progressing by leaps and bounds, and has definitely, his vocabulary has expanded. He can express himself quite well. There are times where he's still, they said 2 years for brain injury before they would consider it healed. So he's not quite 1 year. July, it'll be a year. And he's impressing the therapist, because every time he goes back, he has more words and more, they come easier to him when he's looking at things. Because it's not that he doesn't know them, it's getting the connection of what they are from the brain to come out the mouth in the proper word. Because sometimes he was saying like opposites, if he would say no when he meant yes, and so we had to, relearn a lot of just different developmental things.
So we started his brother Kyle. We would meet up with him every night down at a field at a park from our house, and he would run, play catch, run the track, and just doing awesome. And then one of his grandmother's Zumba friends up in Jensen Beach had him come up on every Friday and do work on his agility and all that up in the Zumba studio. And he just leaps and bounds of improvement. And God's just showed himself faithful every day in Mike and in our home. And he's just a delight to be around. And jeepers, we were out having lunch one day, and I looked at him and said, "How would you like to drive?" So we got him in there. He took to driving like he'd never missed a beat. Bicycle, hops on his bicycle as if he never missed a beat. So it's amazing what God is doing in him. And we just strive for that finish line every day, to walk in more of the manifestation of the healing every day. It's just amazing to watch God at work. And keep expecting, you know, and you know, expecting what's next, you know. It's just that wait, because you know it's going to be good. Everything with God is good. So it's just watching and waiting, because every time it's just more and more, and it's better and better, and it's just amazing.